the planet.
More than 30,000 people showed up for their joint appearance in Denver.
Look, as you know, when you run for president, you do a lot of rallies, and we've done a lot of big rallies. 32,000 people here is by far the largest rally I have ever done, and nobody's running for office. That tells you something.
So what are you trying to accomplish with this tour?
I'm trying to make it clear to the people throughout the world and throughout our own country that the American people are not going to sit idly by and allow Trump establish an oligarchic form of government where Musk and other billionaires are running our government. And we're not going to sit back and allow him to form an authoritarian form of society undermining the Constitution, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and undoing what the founding fathers of this country did in the 1790s, separation of powers, making sure that no one person had an extraordinary amount of power. And that is precisely what Trump is trying to do. He wants it all. He doesn't want Congress. He doesn't want the media. He doesn't want the judiciary. He wants all of the power. We cannot allow him to have that.
Well, I hear you telling people out there, fight back. What do you mean, though? How do they fight back?
Well, that's the question. We're working on it right now. But I think, first of all, coming here and showing the world that Americans are not going to sit back and take what Trump is doing is a good step forward. But obviously, what we need to do is what neither political party is capable of doing right now, and that is develop a strong grassroots movement prepared to run candidates, prepared to stand up and question candidates, demand responsibility from their elected officials to stand with working families and not just the 1%.
I've been covering you for a long, long time. I've heard you railing against millionaires and billionaires for a long time.
Hey, guess what?
Is it different?
Turns out a few other people are catching on to that, right?
Yeah.
I have been talking for many years about this country moving toward an oligarchy. And I think anybody who is not dumb, deaf, or blind is seeing precisely what is happening. Trump's inaugural, right behind him, 3 wealthiest guys in America. You know, Lincoln talked about a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Remember? Well, we got a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class. That's what we have.
So we're about 60 days into the Trump era, the second Trump era. How would you grade the Democratic Party's response?
Well, I would take us back even 2 years before that, before Trump was elected, and saying that it saddens me that when the Democrats had control of the Senate, they did virtually nothing for working people. And I have to say that I'm a member of the Democratic caucus as an independent, so I'm not going to lie to you and tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
And since then, do I think the Democrats have been effective in rallying the American people in stopping Trump's movement toward oligarchy and authoritarianism? No, I don't.
Is there anything that you think Trump has done right?
Yeah, I mean, I think cracking down on fentanyl, making sure our borders are stronger. Look, nobody thinks that illegal immigration is appropriate. And I happen to think we need comprehensive immigration reform. But I don't think that it's appropriate for people to be coming across the border illegally. So we've got to work now on comprehensive immigration reform. The idea that Trump has, I don't know what his latest numbers are, he wants to deport 20 million people who are in this country who are undocumented. Well, you do that, you destroy the entire country, because I got news for you. Trump's billionaire friends are not going to pick the crops in California that feed us. They're not going to work in meat packing houses. That's what undocumented people are doing. So we need a variety of programs, guest worker programs, but mostly comprehensive immigration reform.
But you know, illegal immigration, it exploded under Biden, and it had been high for times under Trump as well, but it exploded under Biden, and nothing was really done until his last year in office when he was...
Yep, should have done much better, no argument.
So realistically, Republicans control the House, they've controlled the White House, they control the Senate. So what realistically can be done?
Well, for major pieces of legislation, you still need 60 votes in the Senate. And let's be clear. I mean, we have picked many of the spots that I've gone to in Wisconsin, in Iowa, in Michigan. We chose them carefully.
Yeah.
And those are because they have Republican congressmen who won by small margins. Right now, I don't know what the number is. I think if 2 or 3 Republicans out of 200 and whatever it is, 18 or whatever they got, choose not to support giving tax breaks to billionaires and cutting Medicaid and education, we can defeat this big supplemental bill, the beautiful bill that Trump wants to see passed. So right now, what we're trying to do is put pressure on those congressional districts demand that Republican Congress people sit down and talk to their constituents and explain why they think it's a good idea to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% and cut veterans programs, cut Medicaid, cut Social Security, cut education.
You said that the passage of this bill, the continuing resolution, was a absolute failure of Democratic leadership. Who are you talking about?
Well, Schumer is the leader of the party, and it should not have happened, period. No question about it. But, you know, when we talk about Democratic leadership, we're talking about the Democratic Party in general. You know, so look, there's been nobody more critical of Chuck Schumer than I have been. And not just on this thing. But the bottom line is not just Chuck Schumer. It's not just Chuck Schumer. It is you got a Democratic Party in general that is dominated by billionaires, just as the Republican Party is, that is operates under the leadership of a bunch of inside the Beltway consultants, very well paid, who are way out of touch with the 32,000 people who are here today.
Ocasio-Cortez's criticism of Schumer has been harsher, fueling speculation she'll challenge him in the Democratic primary when he is up for re-election in 3 years. For his part, Sanders doesn't want to talk about whether or not Schumer should remain the Democratic leader in the Senate. And he got irritated when I asked him about the possibility of AOC running, abruptly getting up to end the interview. Okay, you're out there with AOC today. Do you see her as a future of the progressive?
We have one of the untold stories of what's going on in current American politics, is that in the House of Representatives, you have dozens and dozens of strong, smart, disciplined, hardworking young people in the Progressive Caucus. And you know, way back when I first came to the Congress, the House, I helped form the Progressive Caucus. We had 5 people in it at that time. Now they got close to 100. So you got a whole lot of good people. Alexandria is extraordinary. I am so impressed by her work in Congress and she inspires young people all over the country.
Would you like to see her joining the Senate?
Right now we have, as I said, just a whole lot of people in the Congress. Okay, Jonathan, thanks.
Wait, I got one more. This is important.
Well, I asked you.
Okay.
You know, you want to do nonsense, do nonsense.
No.
I don't want to talk about inside the Beltway stuff. I got 32,000 people.
I was just asking you about AOC because she was out there with you.
No, fine, but I don't want to talk about this. What was the last question?
I was just going to ask you one more question about you. I mean, that's all. I was literally your last.
What is your question?
Well, I mean, it's easier to. I mean, I want to ask you about your future. This is the biggest crowd. You said you ran for president twice. This is the biggest crowd you've ever seen. Are we going to see you run again, or what's your future?
No, right now, I am very proud that the people of the state of Vermont sent me back to the Senate with 63% of the vote. Right now, I'm Vermont senator. That's what I do, and I'm very happy to do it. I am 83 years of age, and I'm tired.